Welcome to Medieval Murder, the podcast that brings all things gruesome and historical to the comfort of your own home or car or wherever it is you're listening from. My name is Hannah Purtymun, and I'm here with my father, Kevin Purtymun.
Hello.
To discuss some of the most famous and infamous murders that took place in the medieval and early modern periods. Medieval Murder came to be first as a blog, then as an Instagram, and now as a podcast after I finished my master's dissertation on homicide in early medieval England. The podcast will feature some of the most famous murders in medieval history, some mini-episode series on different types of medieval murders, and interviews with historians and history enthusiasts alike. Today, we will be talking about a little-known murder, that of St. Ælfheah of Canterbury. Alphege was born in 954 in either Gloucestershire or Somerset, England. It is thought that Alphege was born into Anglo-Saxon nobility. Early in his life, Alphege entered the Benedictine monastery of Deerhurst in Gloucestershire as a monk, but shortly thereafter he transferred to Bath Abbey, where he became an anchorite.
So he was a noble?
Yes.
And then gave that up and went to religious route?
I mean, I'm not really sure he gave it up. I think he probably was, forced is a strong word. But I think his family probably kind of steered him in that direction.
Okay. So now he's a monk?
Well, he's a monk and now he's an anchorite. So, as an anchorite, Alphege would have entered into a strict religious life in which he would take last rites and then be enclosed into a solitary room. This room would often be attached to the parish church with a small window, allowing for a servant or another monk to bring food and water to him. During his time as an anchorite, Alphege would have devoted his time to prayer and meditation. So he's kind of isolated himself away from the world to pray and commune with God.
Sounds like a pretty disciplined life. Doesn't sound like it's not getting a lot of interaction. Doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
No, a lot of silence, a lot of prayer, a lot of thinking. He probably has, the Bible with him, maybe a couple other religious texts.
Yeah, it sounds like if that was me, I would like to be the food delivery guy.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit better.
Yeah, get out and about, maybe.
Yeah, just be a normal monk.
Yeah, kind of be the DoorDash of the medieval times.
Yeah.
So that might be good.
It is unknown how long Alphege led his life as an anchorite before he was actually promoted within Bath Abbey to be an episcopate. He was then elected as abbot of Bath Abbey sometime in the late 970s or early 980s and appointed by the Archbishop of Canterbury. Now, I'm not sure how one goes from being locked into a life of prayer and meditation one day and then the next becomes the abbot of a monastery, but it happened.
So we're talking, he was born, they think, in the 940s.
Yeah.
And then he becomes the leader of he becomes the abbot. Did you say 980s?
970s or early 980s. So he was born in 954.
954.
And so the late 970s or early 980s, he becomes abbot of Bath Abbey.
So he's in his late 20s, maybe.
Yeah, so he probably spent, a couple years as an anchorite.
I don't know. I'm thinking, he may have been there 10 years because, kids got out of the house early then.
Yeah, but he was a monk for a while.
Oh, okay. So he's just your standard run-of-the-mill monk.
And then he decided... So he was at the monastery of Deerhurst as a monk, but then maybe a year or two later, he transferred to Bath Abbey, where he became an anchorite.
Oh, he really got deep into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then somehow he becomes the abbot of the abbey.
Yeah, he usually when they become an abbot, you're appointed, but it's also a vote from the monks. So the monks voted him abbot.
Oh, okay.
even though he had just kind of sat in a room quietly for a couple years.
Oh, okay. I was thinking that maybe the royalty had gotten involved and were kind of saying who was what in the church. So,
I mean, that also could have happened. There could have been some political wheeling and dealing behind the scenes, but
okay, all right.
yeah.
So he's gone from a little room to in charge.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how big Bath Abbey is at this point, but I mean, still in charge.
Yeah, I think he's probably. I think Bath probably at the time was pretty good size. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
comparatively, for it wasn't London, but it was still. Bath today isn't London.
yeah.
So it's probably comparatively.
Mm. So, during his time as abbot, Alphege enacted stricter rules for the monks within the abbey, making sure that they followed the Rule of Saint Benedict, which was written 400 years prior. These rules included a structure for the Benedictine way of life in a monastery, with special attention paid to obedience, the role of the abbot, silence, humility, and even sleep, among others.
So there's probably some monks that are like, we shouldn't have voted for this guy.
I
It's
mean,
getting stricter.
maybe, or they're like, yes, we need the guidance.
Could be, could be.
Could be.
It's probably like anything else. There's some that are like no, and some that are like yes, and
Yeah,
the middle people are like okay.
yeah, this is fine. Yeah. So, during this early period of Alphege's appointment as abbot of Bath Abbey, a new king came to power in England, Athelred the Unready. Athelred became king in 978 at only 10 years old after the death of his father, Edward the Martyr. During his reign, Athelred the Unready dealt with several threats to the English kingdom, including a war with the Danes, which would last several decades, and an increase in Viking invasions throughout the 980s and 990s. So, I mean, this is a very unready king at only 10 years old.
Yeah, it sounds like he has some trials and tribulations there to go on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm sure as soon as people found out that the king was 10 in other lands, i.e., the Vikings, they're like, "Yeah, let's go, let's go."
Yeah. Yeah. So in 984, Alphege was appointed as the Bishop of Winchester by Archbishop Dunstan, who would now become one of the young king's key advisors and counselors. During his time as the Bishop of Winchester, Alphege oversaw the construction of a large organ within the cathedral, which supposedly could be heard up to a mile away and was so large that it took over 20 men to play it. Unfortunately, the organ does not survive today, which is a bummer because that is something I would like to see, this giant 20-person organ.
Yeah. Oh, heck yeah. I mean, and you could hear it a mile away. I mean, if you were in the cathedral, would you be deaf?
Oh, I don't know, maybe. It would
If
probably
it
be
if it was,
crazy loud.
yeah. I mean, that's crazy. And that was in Winchester.
Yeah. Yeah. Alphege also expanded the churches within his district and promoted the cult of Saint Swithin, who had been the Bishop of Winchester over a century before.
Do you know anything about this cult of Saint Swithin? Or
I'd have to do some other research into that.
okay, they're probably just more Christian. I don't know.
Well, not necessarily. They probably go to see, Saint Swithin's shrine occasionally. They believe in his miracles.
Okay.
Yeah. So, during the 980s and 990s, new Viking invasions began in England. However, in 991, the young King Athelred agreed to pay a sum to the Viking invaders in order for the invasions to stop. This was only successful for a short amount of time, as invasions resumed again just 3 years later. One of Alphege's most notable and later relevant accomplishments during his bishopric was the negotiation of a peace treaty with the Vikings after a majorly damaging Viking invasion in 994, in which they attempted to burn the city of London to the ground. Luckily, unsuccessfully.
Okay, so we gotta wait a little bit for the fire of London. Then.
Oh, yeah, the fire of London is along, 600 years later.
Okay. So he actually negotiated a peace treaty with the Vikings.
Well, it's thought that he helped. Yeah. He was not the sole negotiator, but it's thought that he helped.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Viking king of Norway at this time was Olaf Tryggvason, who actually participated in the raid of 994.
Okay.
So he's at the front lines. It is thought that after this raid, as one of the most notable religious figures in England at the time, Alphege provided guidance to King Æthelred in regard to the peace treaty with the Vikings, more specifically with Olaf Tryggvason. After the peace treaty, it is thought that Olaf Tryggvason, king of Norway, actually converted to, or at least confirmed his belief in Christianity with the aid of Alphege's influence. When he returned...
That's pretty big. That's pretty big to get a Viking king to recognize Christianity at that time.
Yeah, and so when he actually recognized this, he became Æthelred the Unready's, I want to say, godfather or something. He became very connected to the king of England.
Okay, Alphege did.
No. Olaf Tryggvason.
Oh, he became. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's,
That's interesting.
They became close.
Okay.
Yeah. So when Olaf Tryggvason returned to Norway, he began to impose Christianity on the areas under his control in Norway, largely communities along the coast. It is also thought that Olaf took Christianity via missionaries to the Shetland, Faroe, and Orkney Islands, as well as to Iceland and Greenland. While Olaf did seem to stick to his word in terms of not raiding England after the peace treaty, other Vikings did continue to invade.
Yeah, because you got Vikings in Denmark. It's what's now Denmark and Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily. Those guys weren't loyal to the King of Norway.
Mm-mm.
And then we've also seen that even Vikings that are subjects of certain kings, like in Egil, where they may be the king's subject, but they still do whatever they want.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So and it's just a couple years later that Olaf Tryggvason actually dies in a battle. So he doesn't last much longer as the king of Norway. So in 1006, Alphege was promoted to be Archbishop of Canterbury, otherwise known as the Big Cheese of Catholic Anglo-Saxon England.
Whoa. So he goes from monk to being sequestered in a cell to...
Chosen. He chose that.
He chose that, to the abbey, to an archbishop, and then all the way to the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Well, he was a bishop, and now he's the Archbishop.
Archbishop of Canterbury.
Which is that's the head honcho in England in terms of the church.
Well, I'm sure the unready king had something to do with that. I mean,
that could be.
He's probably seen a lot of value in him, and he got he helped with the treaty with the Vikings, and
Well, that and the previous Archbishop of Canterbury, Dunstan, is who ensured that he became he's the one who appointed him abbot of Bath Abbey. He's the one who appointed him Bishop of Winchester. The previous Archbishop of Canterbury probably saw something in him.
Right.
And probably mentored him.
Okay. Now, did the Archbishop of Canterbury he replaced, did he pass away, or what happened with him?
That's a good question.
There wasn't some sort of coup going on there where Alphege could be implicated.
No coup.
Okay.
No coup. It looks like he actually died in 988.
Okay, so he just kind of passed away. I'm sure if there was something,
we'd know if there was something fishy.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Something was weird. I'm sure there'd be a red flag or something.
Yeah.
But doing this podcast, you're always thinking, okay, there's something afoot here.
Yeah. So the following year, after he became Archbishop of Canterbury, Alphege journeyed to Rome in order to meet with the Pope. At the time, Pope John the 18th.
So he's really getting deeper or more well known, he's going to go visit the Pope.
Well, he has to, as Archbishop of Canterbury, to go get his little papal insignia or whatever that says he's Archbishop.
Oh,
he has to.
Yeah, the papal seal, papal warrant. I don't know.
No, it's like it's something else. So, as an aside, Pope John XVIII did not wield the papal power for very long. Just 1004 to 1009, during which time he really didn't do much, and then abdicated to go live in a monastery, and then died shortly thereafter.
So here's a guy going kind of backwards in his career.
He was not feeling it. He was like, I don't want to be... I mean, he didn't do much during his pope time. Pretty much because there was a lot of other political wheeling and dealing happening. There was a lot of wars happening, and he was like, I'm good.
I'll just get back to the praying, the meditation.
Yeah. I didn't sign up for this. So during Alphege's journey, he was actually robbed by a gang of highwaymen in Italy, but luckily escaped with his life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just robbed him.
Okay. I wonder if it was before or after he got what he was getting from the Pope.
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. So, while Alphege did several notable things during his tenure as Archbishop of Canterbury, this podcast is dedicated to medieval murder. And so we will skip these things and move on to his death just 4 years later in 1011. So, in around 1011, the Viking raiders, largely made up of Danish and Swedish Vikings, invaded England, led by Thorkel the Tall.
Thorkel.
However,
Thorkel the Tall, okay.
Yeah. However, this time, they focused their attack on Canterbury after having successfully sacked many English cities up the coast.
So is Canterbury, like, outside of London?
It is, like, the far, like, southeasternmost tip of England.
Oh, so it's quite a ways then. It's a little bit from London.
I mean, it's not too far from London. You know, it's probably a couple days' journey on a horse, but it's not that far because London's pretty south too.
Okay.
Yeah. The raiders were described as an immense raiding army by the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and was made up of men who were coming from a career of violence and robbery.
They're Vikings. They're Vikings.
Yes. So that's what they do.
I mean, they farm and then they're Vikings.
Yeah. The invasion lasted almost a month as they laid siege to Canterbury from around the 3rd to the 29th of September 1011.
Okay,
which is that's a long siege.
That's a good month. I mean,
yeah.
I think
I feel like it's long.
I don't know. I'm kind of on the short side there. I think some.
I mean,
some
for a bunch of monks.
Well.
Yeah, no, this isn't like a super duper fortified city with an army. This is a bunch of citizens and monks.
All right. Well.
Yeah, so I just feel like it's. Yeah.
Well, the unready better send some help, man.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, after a strong and I'd assume grueling defense by the citizens of Canterbury, the city was sacked by the Vikings.
Oh.
According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, in this year between the Nativity of St. Mary and Michaelmas, they beset Canterbury and entered therein through treachery, for Ælfheah delivered the city to them, whose life Archbishop Alphege formerly saved.
So what do we know anything about this guy, Ælfheah?
I mean, I don't know much about him. He's an abbot within Canterbury.
Do we know how Alphege saved his life?
No.
All right. Ælfheah bad. Ælfheah bad. Very bad.
Now here, I'm not quite sure to what they're referring, but apparently someone close to Alphege betrayed the city and allowed the Vikings into Canterbury. So, once the Vikings entered into the city, they seized Archbishop Alphege and Ælfweard, the king's steward, and Abbess Leofruna, and Bishop Godwin. And Abbot Ælfheah they suffered to go away. So they let the betrayer go.
That's kind of a giveaway on who did what.
Yeah. They could have pretended, but they didn't.
Right.
And they took therein all the men and husbands and wives, and it was impossible for any man to say how many they were. And in the city they continued afterwards as long as they would. And when they had surveyed all the city, they then returned to their ships, and led the archbishop with them. So, once they had captured everyone who they deemed of importance and plundered everything of value, the Vikings burned Canterbury Cathedral.
Oh.
Yeah, they were like, we're done.
Okay. So they've got the loot. They've probably killed a lot of people.
And they've got the archbishop.
And they've got the archbishop. Did they take any of the other ones?
I think they took them, but I don't think they kept them.
Okay.
At least the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, where we get this information, does not say anything else about these other people. So they could have been killed, they could have been released, but for sure they kept Alphege.
Okay.
So Alphege was kept hostage by the Vikings for 7 months, during which time he refused to allow a ransom be paid for his release. He's like, they burned the cathedral to the ground. They killed all the monks and everybody. You cannot pay them.
So, yeah, he was making a stand there.
Yeah. So, as the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle states, then on the Saturday was the army much stirred against the bishop, because he would not promise them any fee, and forbade that any man should give anything for him. They were also much drunken, for there was wine brought them from the south. Then they took the bishop and led him to their hustings on the eve of the Sunday after Easter, which was the 13th before the calends of May, and there they then shamefully killed him. They overwhelmed him with bones and horns of oxen, and one of them smote him with an axe iron on the head, so that he sunk downwards with the blow, and his holy blood fell on the earth, whilst his sacred soul was sent to the realm of God.
So the Vikings got a little inebriated and a little pissy because he wouldn't ask for more money, and
they basically became a drunken, angry Viking mob.
Okay. Grab your torch and pitchfork. Okay.
Yeah, they killed him. That was the end of
Alphege.
Yeah. So the next morning, the corpse in the morning was carried to London, and the bishops, Ednoth and Ælfheah, and the citizens received him with all honor and buried him in St. Paul's Minster, where God now showeth his holy martyrs' miracles. When the tribute was paid and the peace oaths were sworn, then dispersed the army as wildly as it was before collected. Then submitted to the king 45 of the ships of the enemy, and promised him that they would defend this land, and he should feed and clothe them.
Okay. So
they brought the corpse back. They brought Archbishop Alphege back and allowed him to be buried, basically.
Okay, and then
I think Athelred the Unready then paid them to stop invading, and in turn they gave him 45 ships.
Okay, so it was the Vikings that took his body there.
I think so.
That's kind of the way what you're saying.
I think that's how that worked out.
Wow. Okay. And then they got paid off anyway.
Yeah, they got paid off anyway. He didn't really wasn't much of a stand.
He took a stand, but ended up dead. Maybe he was hoping to inspire some people, spiritually with the stand he took. I don't know.
Probably. Alphege was the first Archbishop of Canterbury to be murdered. The leader of the Viking raiders that killed Alphege, Thorkel the Tall, supposedly attempted to stop the angry mob from killing Alphege. He was so disgusted and appalled that they would kill the Archbishop that he then joined forces with King Athelred.
Oh.
Yeah, Thorkel the Tall is like, you guys are awful, you're a drunken lot, and I'm done. You do not, shouldn't kill him. And I don't know if Thorkel the Tall at this point is a Christian or what's happening, that he's decided to take this stand.
Or maybe he just, I don't know, maybe he just decided he wants to live in England. I don't know. Or maybe, interesting.
I mean, I guess at this point, he's been paid off by the king. A bunch of ships have been taken. Maybe at this point he's like, it's best to just leave well enough alone and hang out in England.
Yeah, maybe I'll join these guys. Okay.
Yeah. So, Alphege of Canterbury was venerated as a saint 50 years later and is now known as St. Alphege of Canterbury, one of the martyred saints.
All right.
Yeah. So that's our little Viking kidnapping execution of a religious figure story.
Now, where's Alphege now? Do we know?
So he was originally buried at St. Paul's Cathedral, and then his body was moved, and then it was moved again, and now nobody knows where he is.
Oh.
So we've lost his bones.
Now, when you say he was buried in the 1100s or
1012.
1012 in St. Paul's Cathedral, is that going to be the same? Is St. Paul's Cathedral today the same, or is St. Paul's Cathedral back then on the same place?
I think it was around in the same area, but St. Paul's actually burned to the ground centuries later, and so it's a new St. Paul's Cathedral now.
Okay, so it may be the same area.
Yeah, I think hypothetically it's the same area.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, it was built, in the 7th century, supposedly.
Okay, all right, the one we're talking about him being buried at.
Yeah, and then it was, it's been built a couple times, and then it was burned in 1087.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
So.
And then I think it was burned again later. So yeah, his body, we don't know.
Okay. Well, excellent.
Yeah. So thank you for listening to Medieval Murder. If you have any listener questions, comments, or topic suggestions, please feel free to reach out via our Twitter account @MurderMedieval, our Instagram account @MedievalMurder, or via email at info.medievalmurder@gmail.com. And if any of you are interested in rocking some medieval murder merchandise, take a look at our website, medievalmurder.org. Tune in later for our next podcast.